these two sections and kind of act like you like each other for less, 40 minutes or so. This one's on how to talk to your kids about technology, and part of this blending of generations in the church is maybe giving some advice of what you have done, what has helped you and your family, and so we might be able to share some of that if you're willing. So they're making their way down. How about that? Ready to go? Okay.
I think this is the first time I've ever been in a church where people actually moved when you told them to move. So Maple Hill is a special place, very unique. I love it. All right, so on this session, like he said, we want to talk about ways to cultivate conversations. And as I mentioned before, our goal as parents, grandparents, mentors is not to avoid discomfort, but is to guide curiosity and to guide expectation. And this is kind of the ways that we can do that. So what are some ways to approach permanency, the idea of what we just talked about, letting the toothpaste out of the tube? Ephesians 4:29 says, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as it fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." I'm at the stage of life now where a lot of the original posts I made on Facebook are popping up as memories on Facebook. And College Jason was a moron and really weird. Things that no longer have context, you're like, why would I ever type and press enter after that? But that's a really good example of what happens online actually does stay online. It's on a server somewhere. There's no such thing, and Snapchat was really successful early on with this when they said, hey, you can make a post and then it just disappears. Nothing just disappears. It stays gone until someone wants to leverage it for their benefit against you. So how do we teach the next generation? Well, the first thing is say good things. Post good things. What's something that would age really well down the road? Well, something that's encouraging or something that's overcoming a hurdle of some sort, like positive things, joyful things, things that are good in spiritual context. Those are the things that we want to promote. I usually have, if I'm talking to teenagers or something, I'll have like the big burly football player, the oldest and the senior in the group that's the manliest of men. I have him stand over here, and then I'll have like a 7th grade girl, nice and petite, hello, over here, and give them like a bottle of ketchup and a bottle of mustard. Give them 10 seconds to see who can squirt the most out of the canister. And you ready? Say, ready, go, and just get them going quick. And you see the football guy, he's crushing, he's like, oh, and the little girl is just kind of squeezing it. After 10 seconds, all right, good job. Who won? Let them vote. And then, now you have another 10 seconds to see who can put it back in the container the fastest. Ready, go. And so then they're like, wait, I don't know. They're all trying to scoop it in there. It's impossible. It's a fruitless endeavor. If you're trying to squirt toothpaste out of a tube and put it back in there, it just doesn't work well. This is really good, I think, for young children all the way up through teenagers. It's a visual way for them to represent, once your words are out there, they're out there. And today, once your pictures are out there, they're out there. Once your videos are out there, they're out there. We have this digital thumbprint or digital fingerprint out there. There's evidence of where we've been and what we've done and what we've seen. So how do we get our children at a really young age to understand it's important to think not just once or twice or 18 times before you actually post something? Ask them questions of the why. Why are you going to post that? If we can get ingrained in their minds from the very beginning, what is your purpose, one, for having the device or the app, but two, what is your purpose for posting? Well, I want my friends to see what I did today. Okay, that's not a bad thing. Are you boasting? Because that's when it could become a bad thing. Or are you finding value in how people interact with that? What if you posted that, but you set it to private and nobody ever commented or liked it? How would that make you feel? Well, that's not a big deal. I just kind of want to keep it up there for reference. That's my yearbook. Okay, that's fine. Or if the response is, well, that would make me really sad. Okay, now we're starting to find our identity in the feedback loop. So we're trying to get them to think in really simple concepts what leads to dangerous things. So we identify the danger. Let's work from the destination backwards. How do we prevent the danger from happening? And I think just a very simple toothpaste, ketchup, mustard, those are really good ways to show them tangible illustrations of how to go about that. This is one of my favorite posts. There's another Instagram account called Wait Until 8th. It's a really good account to follow. Now, I ran across this story on that Instagram account. This is Freddie Prinze Jr. and Sarah Michelle Gellar, and in the late 1990s, early 2000s, they were like the Zach Morris, Kelly Kapowski, which is same era reference, so not helpful. They were the king and queen of pop culture there. Guys really had crushes on Sarah Michelle, and girls had big crushes on Freddie Prinze Jr. Well, they got together, and the world was great for a little while. They had a couple of kids together, and in an interview, once Sarah Michelle Gellar was asked, well, how do you guys navigate technology and social media with your kids? And she said, well, I told my youngest, and I don't remember exactly how old the child was at the time, but she said, I told him that me giving you access to social media as a 5-year-old is a lot like me saying having a Paw Patrol face tattoo is a good idea. When you're 5, right now we have a 2.5-year-old, and anything Paw Patrol or Mighty Pups or all of those things, there's just not enough for him to consume. He loves it. So if I were to say, hey, buddy, Nolan, you can get a Paw Patrol face tattoo, he would absolutely, yes, please, right here, right here. Chase is on the case, and now he's on my face. Like, he would love it. But in just a really short period of time, definitely within a few years, homeboy walks into middle school with a Paw Patrol face tattoo, like, man, you want to be beat up. Just play in traffic, it's safer, right? Like that's not going to age well, along with all of the barbed wire tattoos from the 80s that probably won't age well. But if I were to allow my kid to have a Paw Patrol face tattoo when I know they're going to regret it, what kind of parent am I? Why would I give them access to something that I know they're going to use in a way that they're going to regret? That's a really good way, not just for kids, but for parents to understand, but maybe a way to explain to your middle adolescents, to your 10-year-old or your 15-year-old, like, what if I let you have that Paw Patrol face tattoo? Would you still want to have that? Or do you think that what you like right now as a 15-year-old is going to be the same thing that you're going to like in 10 years from now as a 25-year-old? And then go and show them pictures of you in high school and the clothes you wore, right? Like, that's a good way to show it, except for when, like, Birkenstocks come back in style, and then they're like, oh, you were cool. Like, sort of, kind of, not, yeah. But I wore cool shoes. Some of that's cyclical, but some of it also is a little silly. There was a lot of polyester in the 70s, and at the time, in the context of the 70s, that was the right choice. But most of us have changed our carpets since then. Most of us have changed our wardrobe since then. If we know our kids are going to change, why would we give them access to make these massive decisions and make them very public without giving them any kind of guardrail? I really like the driver's license approach in our country, or at least in our area. You have to be 15 to get a permit, 16 driver's license, and even then you have some parameters like curfew and things like that. Growing up, I drove a car before I had a license to drive a car. My parents put me behind the wheel to just steer when I was a little kid, and as I got older and I could reach the pedals, then we would kind of go to a parking lot. We'd do those kinds of things, like incremental freedom. It was right alongside increased responsibility. And it wasn't until I showed a consistent pattern of maturity and wisdom, at least to a certain point, that they felt good about giving me the keys and letting me drive on my own. I had to read a book, a manual, and I had to take a test about that manual. I had to learn not just the mechanics of driving, but I actually had to learn a little bit about the car, and I had to learn a lot of bit about the laws of the car, because it's not just me in the car, it's my car and all the people around me. People that are walking, people that are driving, people on bicycles, people on motorcycles. And I have to learn to think about all of that while safely navigating the vehicle. Well, that sounds like a really good analogy and approach for social media, because it's not just my child on the platform, but it's everybody else on the platform, right? It's not just what they're putting out there, but it's what's being fed into them as well. So why not have them read some books, read some literature? I just had that book list up there. From that one, I thought I had one more slide about that one. There's 3 or 4 books on there, and I'll try to get with Adam about the ones that I would recommend that parents read with their kids or have their kids read at least excerpts from it. And then you can talk about it. We're talking about cultivating conversations. Hey, listen, you want the device? This is what you got to do. Well, I don't want to do it. None of my friends have to do it. That's cool, man. You live here, and you do have to do it. Most likely, they'll do it begrudgingly, but most likely it'll lead to a really good conversation. And then you tell them about your experience growing up, and you try to give them a context for why your parents put certain parameters around you having access to the car or the phone or what have you. And try to get them to understand the why. A lot of times they only want to know the why on their terms. They want to know the why when they don't get the answer they want, but we can teach them the why anyway. I think incremental freedom, just like we approach a driver's license, as well as informed responsibility. So have them read. Ask them questions like, hey, what if you were in the car here and your friends called you on your phone, what would you do? What would be the right thing to do? Explain the why of the parameters. Talking about screen time, this was a TED Talk that I ran across, and it's the best visual representation that I have seen when it comes to talking about time, basically. This graph, these charts represent, each row represents 3 years of life. So this is the life expectancy of an 18-year-old. I believe this was based off of life expectancy from, I think it was like 3 years ago now. But that's a lot. That's the rest of your life. And so you show that to them and you say, well, this is how it breaks down. The purple dots represent 288 months. That's the amount of time you're going to spend asleep. About a third, roughly a third of your life you're going to spend sleeping. Then you're going to spend a big chunk in work and school. That's the green ones. And then you got about half a row of driving. You're going to spend a full row cooking and eating. You're going to spend about 27 months in the bathroom with hygiene. That may vary based off of your child and their cleanliness. And then you're going to spend about 3 years of your life just doing chores and running errands. So now you have this chunk of free time, the bottom third of your life, roughly 334 months. And based off of the average amount of screen time, I think in 2023, those black dots represent the amount of time you're going to spend on a device. 312 months of screen time. Now, this doesn't mean that you're spending 312 months looking up pornographic material. I assume it's 312 months of nothing but Bible app. But just in case that's not you, regardless of whether it's purely evil or purely good, that's 312 months of your attention devoted to one thing. That is a little concerning. That is a little alarming. There's a push right now to get outside, and there's several groups, I just lost the name of it, it came through the brain and went out just as quick. 1,000 hours outside, I think is what it's called, or something along, there's a number, hours outside. You can Google that. My wife has a poster on our refrigerator, and we color in each hour that the kids spend outside. They get to color in a part of the picture, and they've made them very kid-friendly. So especially our 6 to 10-year-old, they really like it. So it's kind of a competition a little bit, but it also gets them in the natural environment. We are unbelievably blessed in our neighborhood. We live in a cul-de-sac, and kind of catty corner from us is a family that we have very similar spiritual convictions and parenting convictions. And so our kids go and they play in their backyard, and they jump on the trampoline, and they come to our backyard and they play wiffle ball and they play on the swing set. And there are 3 or 4 other families in the neighborhood that have kids similar ages, so they play outside a lot. I'm grateful for that. That's one of the social norms that Jonathan Haidt puts in his book, Anxious Generation. He says when kids need more unchaperoned time outside so that they can build resilience, they can understand group dynamics, so that they can develop all of those social cues that we don't develop anymore when you just stay indoors and just stay online. I think this graph is a very sobering image. And when I've shown it to teenagers, they actually have a similar response as well. I don't think we realize just how much time we're giving to these devices. James 4:14 says, "Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you're a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes." I learned the depth of this verse in a very painful way a year ago, New Year's Eve. Every other week we go to my parents for lunch after worship. And as I was walking up to the door, my brother was there, and he just met me at the door, which is a little unusual. And he had this very kind of concerned look on his face. He said, "Aunt Lori's died, and Mom just found out." I said, "Oh, okay. That's awful." Lori is the youngest of 4. My mom is the second oldest. Lori was really kind of her baby as much as she was her sister. They were very, very, very close. Her best friend in the world, as well as closest sibling. And their mother had passed about 4 or 5 months before. I said, "Well, was it a car accident or something? Because that would make sense, right?" He said, "No, we don't know. She went to sleep and didn't wake up." We later found out that she had some underlying medical conditions that nobody really understood the gravity of. And she and her husband have a home in Roswell, Georgia, and they have a farm in North Carolina. And he was staying in Roswell to do some work, and she drove up to the farm and truly just laid down on the couch and did not wake up. The amount of pressure on her heart, it just stopped beating. Had she gone to the hospital that night and had a blood transfusion, she'd be fine. So that's even more difficult. I still struggle to make sense of it. She was the youngest, and I would have said the healthiest of all of my mom's siblings. It It doesn't make sense. Life sometimes doesn't make sense, and sometimes it's cut shorter than we think it should be. So why are we spending all of our time and giving all of our attention to things that don't matter? Turn my eyes from looking at worthless things and give me life in your ways. That should be at Hobby Lobby a lot more prevalent than it is, right? Finding it on something, engraved on something, put it over your television, make it your lock screen on your phone, just as a reminder. Remind our kids, remind our grandkids, remind the people that we're mentoring. And the very simple question, not just for them, but for us, what is your purpose? This is the why. What is your purpose for technology? If you can answer that question, then you're probably headed in the right direction. You're learning to discern. If my purpose is spiritual, then move forward. This was, again, a clip from the Social Media and Youth Mental Health Report. Walk your kids through why, hey, the Surgeon General says this is bad. One thing I meant to mention earlier was when we're looking at big tech versus big tobacco, similar playbooks. The very first Surgeon General warning that identified cancer-causing agents in cigarettes and nicotine came out in 1964. 1964. I don't think until like the early to mid-90s was the first time public opinion started to change surrounding those things. So we're talking 30 years of big tobacco marketing that was really effective. Companies like Camel Cigarettes, who created a cartoon as their mascot to market to younger generations. Because if you hook them early, you hook them for a lifetime. Well, big technology, especially social media, has been doing that as well. A friend of mine that I went to school with at Faulkner, he is a lawyer, and apparently a really good lawyer. He's had depositions with Jonathan Haidt and other researchers. They're suing Facebook or Meta, Snapchat, TikTok, these social media platforms that knew their devices and their technologies, their platforms were addictive. And they knew that they were particularly addictive and made adolescents vulnerable, and they still marketed towards them and manipulated them. They can't hold them accountable for the content that are on their platforms constitutionally, but they can for this stuff, the same way big tobacco was held accountable. So there's some excitement there, and that there could be progress. We're already seeing in a lot of states where pornography sites now are being limited because you have to have a profile that confirms your age verification. That one step of resistance is huge. Just like Amazon, if you've got to go through 4 or 5 prompts to pay for something, you're probably just going to wait and get it somewhere else because it's too much of a hassle. Well, that's a good thing. Other platforms as well, social platforms, more age verification is being implemented to try and help with some of that. How does your app, this is the other question there, how does your app, how does your device, how does it cultivate the fruit of the Spirit? If your kid doesn't know what the fruit of the Spirit is, congratulations, you have a great entry into a Galatians chapter 5 Bible study. Can we identify the fruit of the Spirit in our life? If so, we need to be talking about that in front of them. We need to be asking them, how are you more loving? You got a new convert. Well, tell me, what's changed? Are you more kind now? Is there more joy in your life? Because if there's fruit of the Spirit, if there's evidence of the Spirit at work and active and involved in our life, then yeah, all of those things will be increasing. We will be more patient, more loving, more kind. Does your app cultivate that? Do you feel like you're less anxious, you're more joyful? Are you more willing to share things when you're on your devices a lot? That's a great question to ask. I don't know why the globe keeps floating back and forth. Technology amplifies what's in our heart. This is something we've said a lot, and this is something that I think we need to say a lot in our homes. It amplifies in your heart. It cultivates your desires. So what is it cultivating? What is it amplifying? Talk to them about what we just talked about, oxytocin and vasopressin. One of the books on that list is called Hooked. I would highly recommend that book for every parent, for every youth minister, for every grandparent, to talk to people about what's happening in our bodies, particularly in our brains, when we engage in intimacy. Teach them these things. Like I said, I didn't learn it in Bible class. I didn't learn it in anatomy and physiology or biology, and that's a shame. I had to learn this as an adult. Would have been really helpful. Again, the book list and the YouTube playlist, I think that was the last one I had on there. Yep. But this is also a session where I want to learn. So I kind of went through those as quickly as I could to give you some places to begin, some places to start, but my oldest kid is 10 years old. So I acknowledge I am not deep in this from a family standpoint. In youth ministry, we faced it a lot. We encountered a lot of different things, but I want to learn. For those of you particularly that have teenagers or have had teenagers in recent years specifically, how did you navigate some of this? Are there any things that you would share that were either really helpful or something that even maybe was not helpful, a regret that you had, you wish you had done differently. This was the whole reason for moving closer. So, well, I was going to drink water, but it's not there, so never mind. Yes, sir. Sorry. And that gave them a vested interest. He said that when they first started getting cell phones, they had to pay for the cell phone bill. My parents did the same thing. Same thing with the car. We had to have some skin in the game. But that was a time when you had to pay for text messaging, you had to pay for minutes. So again, some natural parameters that now in the age of unlimited don't exist. So we got to find some ways to bring that in there. I think that teaches them responsibility, and they don't just, well, they understand the hurt, when they want to increase their amount and stuff. That's great. That's very good. Anybody else? Questions are also welcome. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think it's hard in the youth minister side of that to, how do I leverage this in ways that are helpful? Doing a Kahoot or something is a great way to engage. Bless you, sir. Thank you. Fantastic facial hair. I am the walrus. Cuckoo, cuckoo. We've already talked, so it's cool. We're friends. We go way back about an hour or so, I think. May have been the best moment of our friendship, actually. With that, trying to use innovation, but at the same time, this is the challenge. There's a great quote by a guy named Wendell Berry. Wendell Berry was a farmer and an author, and he's got a book called The Unsettling of America. He talks about how legislation, particularly in the 70s and 80s in the agricultural industry, really changed food for us in America. And in order now, the family farm has been decimated. In order to farm, you have to lease big equipment and you have to row crop thousands of acres. And in order to grow, you have to lease more, so you have to go in further debt. And his quote there is, "The cure maintains the disease." And I feel like that speaks to what you're saying here, is oftentimes we're trying to communicate in some innovative, creative ways, but the question is this helping or hurting? Like, am I helping communicate to the next generation, or am I just maintaining this disease of distraction and all of those things? So I do think Jonathan Haidt's book is relevant here as well. We kind of have to create our own culture. And that's not just youth ministry, that's family-wise, right? And that's the challenge, because as a parent, when you give your kid a phone before my kid gets a phone, there's now tension between us, right? We all get to choose where that starting line is. But what Haidt has tried to put forth is that now we need a mutual basement that is higher than it once was. We need to have some phone-free environments. And I think that is something that youth ministry is one area, but collectively as families, having conversations with each other. If you go on vacation with other families, that's a rule. That's one of the rules. Communicate with Alex what your family expectations are. The expectations in the way we approached youth ministry was we have our own rules, and particularly dress code was one. Not all families shared our conviction on dress code. But whenever we would get asked, well, why do we have to do that? Why do we have to wear whatever when we're going on water activities? Whenever we explained the why, the kids were always like, oh, I never really thought about that. We would ask them, like, what kind of environment do you think we're trying to create on these events? Well, for us to have fun, yes, but do you, like, hopefully is there more than that? Like, okay, yeah, the spiritual, exactly. Our number one priority is a spiritual environment. And so that's where we start. And everything that we do, all of our decisions are trying to reinforce a spiritual environment. For a lot of people, lust is a big challenge. It may not be for you, but it is for a lot of people. So we don't want to knowingly encourage a tire that might also encourage lust. Also, a lot of people struggle with body image. And so when people that don't struggle with that wear a lot less clothes than those people that do struggle with that, well, it makes them uncomfortable. And that discomfort distracts from the spiritual goal that we're after. Never had a kid that was like, well, that's really, usually like, well, I just never really thought about that. So I think when it comes to parents, as a youth minister, I wanted to be informed. I wanted to know, I didn't necessarily embrace every rule or every lack of rule of every family, but I wanted to be informed of what those are. So I think having more of those conversations as adults are really good, as leaders, as influential leaders. And I think explaining the culture we're trying to build is important because when everybody, it's positive peer pressure. And what they don't tell you is that there's peer pressure as parents, maybe even more so than there was as a kid. And that's one of those things. When my kid doesn't have something that other kids do, now I'm the bad guy. Nobody likes to feel like the bad guy. But as parents, we willingly accept that in the pursuit of the spiritual, right, that we're after. So, Alex, I hope you're taking notes. I do think that's a great thing. What in culture, what environments are we trying to create and cultivate? Yes, ma'am. This is so true. Truer words have never been said. We don't get it. You're right. No, it's much worse, son. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely the goal. That's the balance, the wholeness, of that relationship and that family dynamic. That's a great point. I don't think it's exclusive to one parent or the other. Part of my job as a parent, I've discovered, is to not just teach my child, but to learn my child and to learn how they communicate. And there are times when mama's voice resonates deeper with boys than daddy's voice does because we're too much alike. And sometimes it's vice versa with my daughter. But with this particular conversation, that's a great point, especially as they continue to get older and they can understand not just tangible concepts, but they start to understand emotions and we're trying to communicate that. I think that's a really, really strong point. Absolutely. Right. We can do hard things, right? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I think it's important there, too. You mentioned your past may make this difficult to talk about. I think it's really important for spouses to know each other's background when it comes to intimacy because it gives you so much more context for the person, right? And it makes these conversations with your children a little bit more, not easier per se, but just more whole, I guess. When that conversation's already been broached with your spouse, the person that you have the closest intimacy with of anybody, then you're both better prepared, I think, to equip your children for that. Great point. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, there's so much value to that. One, the content that they're consuming, whether it's sexual in nature or just going to ChatGPT and asking it all these things. It's cultivating a relationship late at night. The best conversations I usually had with young people were on retreats, and a lot of times later at night when your mind is just kind of racing through the day and you're doing sort of a cleanse of your mind a little bit, they're receptive. So that's particularly dangerous for them to be receptive to the world's microphone. But there's a lot of studies right now that say how devices are dysregulating sleep. And so there's a physical, emotional, and spiritual aspect to putting our own guardrail, particularly at nighttime. If they feel like they want to talk, then we want them to come to us, not to go to their device. That's great.
Hey, James.
Yes, sir.
You probably know, we've been having a parent class this quarter.
Yeah.
And as much as we tried to stay away from technology, because knowing you were coming, something that we were talking about Wednesday night was just several of the parents of, I think it was like ninth grade and also like fifth or sixth graders. And they had kind of gotten together and talked about, okay, when are you going to get your kid a phone? And they're trying to kind of coordinate this together. And
Yeah.
I thought that was so cool.
I love that. Yeah.
Trying to work through those things as a family together. But then something else that came out of that was, okay, what about, and I heard somebody say this at lunch as well, okay, what about, like, so my kid's 14 now, I gave them the phone at 11, now what?
Yeah.
What advice do you have for parents that are kind of in that boat that, they feel like, man, the cork's already out now, what do I do? The toothpaste is already out of the tube, how do I
Sure.
unwind the clock now that, this is 3 years ago, what do I do?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really hard question, I think, because so much of that depends on your kids. Some kids are naturally curious in some really harmful ways, and other kids are not. I think when you realize as a parent, oh, I should have been doing something for a long time, and I haven't, the relationship is the most important key piece of this puzzle. You continue to invest deeply in their relationship, and you begin having adult conversations with them, asking them more why questions than just what. I think, again, this one's hard because it just kind of, I feel like it depends on the situation of the kid or what they're doing with their technology. If you see that addictive behavior there, then don't just take their device as a reaction to that, I think. When it's just like when my parents took my keys away, they weren't just taking away a car, they were taking away what I saw as my conduit to relationship, to my community, to my people. They took away what I saw was freedom. And when we're Americans, when people encroach on our freedom, right, we come out swinging. And I think this generation has that same visceral reaction with their phone. So understand, one, if you take it away, you're taking away their perception of all of their friends. So if that's the case, what are you supplementing there? It's not just a takeaway, it's also what presence are you bringing into their life? So if they're addicted to their phones or you think they're on them too often, they're not doing activities, find a vacation of sorts. And it doesn't have to be Disney World. Find a Saturday trip that you're going to take as a family, and you also put your phone away. And find new rhythms in your life, trying to put in family game night. If they want to watch a screen, let's make it a movie. We're all going to watch it, but we're all going to put our phones away, mom and dad included, and we're all going to watch this one screen together, because that's a community event. This is an individual event. I think trying to find small ways to show them what they're missing and what's harming them, while incrementally putting in more guardrails. A lot of times, if you do a hard stop, sometimes that's warranted. Again, this is where it's nuanced, I guess. But I think we can be creative in how we help them identify what's hurting them. But it's hard when they don't accept that, right? They only see it as, the only thing that's hurting me is you limiting my access to that. That is not a good answer to your question. I know that. But I'd love to talk more about it. But it's more, I feel like it is a little bit more of an individual. The biggest thing is to start putting some kind of incremental increase in guardrails in there so that they can finally look up. And it may be, when I say finally, it may be when they're 20 and 30-year-olds. It may be when they're parents even. I don't know what this is going to look like in 20 years. We've not had 20 years of digital parenting to look back on just yet. We're just now getting that, so to speak. I would also ask them about their friends. There was one kid that came up to me after I talked about this at Madison, and he said, I'm just so thankful that you said it's okay to not have your phone out, because all of my friends always have their phones out. So half of these kids are feeling the exact same way we are as adults, and they just kind of need permission to talk about it. And so if you give them a challenge, tell them, you're going to buy them a new something for their phone if they can go 1 week without looking at it. Give them some kind of challenge and then at the end of that week, okay, what was different? Do you feel different? You don't have any more headaches. Do you think maybe there's a cause? No, maybe not. Okay. Try to find some ways to make it game-like, especially if they're gamers. A lot of kids that are really insecure and introverted, that's how they find their community. And I find it to be a double-edged sword. We had a young man who was autistic several years ago, and through Nintendo 64 Mario Kart, he created this entire world where each of us as individuals had a personality that was represented on Mario Kart, and he put together these battles and all this. And he went from a kid that wouldn't talk to anybody to a kid that everybody loved and was in the midst of all that we did. And a video game was the conduit for that. So it can be used really well. What we tried to do, though, was to not make it only the video game. So that got them together, but then, hey man, Eric, come over here, let's do this. So that got them there, that got them comfortable, and then we kind of nudged him in other directions. So if you can use something they love, like a video game, in a positive way, or as a motivating factor, don't make that the destination. Find a way to make sure that that's a part of the process, but not the destination, if that makes sense. I feel like that's an inadequate answer. I'm sorry. You should hire somebody to come here to talk about that's just really good at it, and I'll find that guy and send him your way. Sorry. Anybody else? That's usually what I do, is deflect. What do you guys think? Anybody had that experience where they feel like they're 4 and 5 years into it, and now they're realizing, oh no, what have I done? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I think that's valuable. I also would say, I know we have this sense of urgency. We get 18 or so years to be the primary influence, but something does change in that relationship when they become a true adult. And as parents, we are in this for the long game, and children are really good at just utterly destroying us, and also unbelievable at going way beyond our expectations, and sometimes simultaneous. So it's a very confusing thing. But I would encourage all of us to know that we're going to look back at some point and say, man, I really wish we had navigated that a little differently. Have some grace for yourself, but also make sure that your lifestyle reflects the lifestyle and the standard that we're trying to hold our kids to. That's where I would start for anyone that feels like they're too far into it. You're never too far into it. Let them see the change in your lifestyle. If you felt like they were struggling with eating too much, well then you yourself go on a diet, right? Show that wherever there's too much or excess in our life, in our kids' lives, are we making sure that there's not excess in our lives? So that's a kind of a physical analogy there that maybe would start that, and it's got to be a consistent pattern, because kids can sniff out inconsistency so quickly They never hold themselves accountable to inconsistency, but that's beside the point. We have to hold ourselves even more accountable, I think. And then you could also work to start changing that friend group a little bit. Make sure that your house is the place where people can come and hang out. We want our kids to feel comfortable inviting their friends to our house because we get to control that environment and that culture there. We don't necessarily always want to send them somewhere else. So what are you doing in your home to host a video game party if it's gaming that they like? Well, come on, y'all come over, we'll host it here and be a part of that. Find other adults that you know that have influence and make sure that they're a part of their life. For Madison's youth ministry, retreats that's what we hang our hat on. We didn't do a ton of conferences. Some of that was due to our size, but retreats, we were in control of the environment, and we would tell our chaperones, you're not just here to drive a bus, and you're probably not even here for your own kid to get the most out of it, but somebody's kid is here and needs to talk to you, even if it's not your own. So find those other voices of wisdom and reason and influence and make sure that they have prominence in their life. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
In your research, are you finding that, so like we talk about phones, right, and technology, but is it a phone? Is it access to internet? Is it social media? Like what is it in that that's specifically causing?
Yes. Yes. I think it's all, the difference in watching Bluey on a phone or a tablet versus watching Bluey on a TV is there's still this sense of control. Even with the remote, our kids want the remote just so it sits in their presence because the remote communicates power, right? So I think the individual nature of a tablet or a phone can be dangerous, especially for really young children. Social media, obviously, is huge. The feedback loop, the echo chambers, the insecurities, the body image, the comparison. The platform itself, just in its existence, is not evil, but by nature, we start to compare. And when you can't regulate up here, then you start validating based off of likes and feedback. So I think it is all of those. I have not seen any redeemable value of implementing that kind of technology in elementary school age children. If there's one thing that I don't really like about where our kids are at school, it's that there's too many devices that are a part of their day. There's just not, the fact that they're an Apple distinguished school or a Google distinguished school, that's marketing, in my opinion, by the tech companies. And that's part of what's trying to be pulled back. Ironically enough, California and Colorado are leading the way of phone-free schools and places like that. So I think part of it is that it is the whole ball of yarn is a big part of it. And it's all kind of happened simultaneously. And so we're just now starting to parse out some of the ingredients that are part of the toxins. And it's not just getting one that's going to change everything. It is kind of a quote-unquote holistic approach. That's why the spiritual conversation and tone, we have to put it all in spiritual context. We have to get them to translate their life stage because we can't keep up with the apps. There's just no way. They keep coming out. So I'm not trying to teach my kid how to navigate a specific app as much as I am trying to teach them how to think spiritually about the technology that's in their life and how they use it. So you're teaching the how to fish kind of thing. So is that answer? I'm full of poor answers today. That's what I'm here for.
No, I asked that because it's, when we were growing up, and by the way, I'm a millennial and I did use a rotary phone.
There you go. Good for you.
It was at my great-grandmother's house.
That's right. There you go. Yeah. We had the yellow phone that had like the 160-foot cord that reached every room in the house. Yeah. That's it.
But when we were growing up, we had a house phone, right? And our kids now, we don't have house phones, and I don't really want my 15-year-old texting a 15-year-old boy on my phone. That would be weird and inappropriate. So that's kind of where we're in the middle of figuring out what that looks like for him.
Yeah.
Be able to communicate, but not
Right.
have access to everything.
Here's the challenge is that a group chat immediately becomes a bad place when there's gossip, when there's making fun of people. So it's not even just, it's children learning how to interact with children. And the challenge is that it almost exclusively took place face-to-face for generations. And now we've lost a face in that equation, but they're still having to navigate those same dynamics. And so it's not that texting is even inherently wrong, but it can be wrong, right? The group chat can go sideways super quick. And I think that's why, as a parent, you have both the right and an obligation to see everything. You are the eyes. You are their eyes and ears for a while. until they learn to fly on their own. And you can identify some unhealthy things in there. And if you see the group chat's going in a really inappropriate, mean direction, then you can bring that up in other contexts with them as well. Like, hey, has anybody ever said anything mean to you? And just kind of, I don't know, sometimes we have to be subtle, sometimes we have to be very direct. And I think as a parent, I get access to all of your communications here. And as I see a pattern of wise behavior, I'm going to give you incremental freedom. And I think it's really important to give them credit when credit is due. I'm really notorious for the guy that, like, you're going to hear about it when you did wrong, kid. But when you did right, hey, good job. All right, let's move on. Like, I want to build them up as much as I also point out the inconsistency. Our daughter snuck onto a computer and was looking up cat items. She really wanted a cat. I'm not a cat person, but now I'm a cat owner. And what she did wasn't inherently wrong, evil in my sight, but not wrong. And I found her in the office, and I said, hey, what you doing? She immediately closed and said, I'm sorry. What are you sorry for? Being on the computer. Okay. Were you supposed to? No. Did you ask mommy or daddy? No. Okay. Show me what you're looking at. Get all 48 of those items out of the cart immediately. We're not paying for that. Secondly, what you did was not right. I'm not angry with you, but I do want to explain something to you. I want you to understand that this situation is one of the reasons why it's going to be a long time before you have access to a phone or to your own access to the online world. If you can't obey mommy and daddy's rules that are designed to help you in this simple context, then I'm not going to give you freedom that goes way beyond that, right? I explained it really concisely there. I wish I could have written it down because I don't remember it. But in that moment, my whole goal was to say, what happened here, this is how the consequence scales up here down the road. And your actions right now, just simply obeying, doing your chores, when you show me a pattern of wise, humble character, then I know you're ready for the next step of freedom. And we're going to talk about that. The challenge sometimes is telling them what that next step is going to be. That's why the parent conversations with each other are really important to kind of get some milestones in there. But then also, and Jonathan Haidt has, I think it's in chapter 4 or 5, I was listening to it the other day in Anxious Generation. He kind of puts out a few different milestones. He says every even year from 6 to 18, you give some kind of incremental freedom of some sort. So at 6 years old, you get to do chores now. You get like 1 or 2 chores where you get rewarded with an allowance or something like that. Make them a part of the family, and you kind of build off of that. For my kids, for my daughter in that situation, I wanted her to know that what she was doing wasn't inherently evil, but what she did was wrong because it was outside what we had laid down for her. So when she can identify and do things that are not evil, but also do what we say, then that's the sweet spot when we start giving you more opportunity. So I think teaching them in an analog situation why the spiritual decision or why the digital decision could be dangerous is really important so that they start making those connections. We think it's obvious. They don't. They haven't made those connections yet. The synapses they've not connected just yet. So I think that's important. Anything else? All righty. We'll close with the prayer after Adam uncomfortably stands up. Sister, you staying? You got it. Okay, let's pray. Father, we thank you so much for the opportunity to be together. It has been good to gather in your name today. Thank you so much for giving us your word as a guiding light for every generation in which we live. Help us as parents and as grandparents and as spiritual mentors to do a really effective job of being able to reach the next generation, to calibrate the language so that they understand your biblical truths in the context in which they live. Help us to be curious as parents so that we can continue to learn, and help us to be effective communicators and also just living as Christ would have us to live. We thank you again for your Son. It's through his name we pray. Amen.